Welcome along everybody. Thank you for joining me this morning for our pastel class. Hi everyone, hi Mandy. Steve, is that Steve? Let me put my glasses on, I've got a chance of seeing you all. Hi Sandra, good to have you along. Can everyone hear me okay? Do a sound check. Fabulous. Excellent, so welcome along and thank you so much to the SAA for inviting me along today to do this wonderful Kingfisher pastel demo for you. So this is one I did earlier, just like play school. Let me just tell you before we get started what I'm working with. Good morning, Mandy. I'm working with Clairefontaine pastel mat. Bear with me one sec, guys. Clairefontaine pastel mat, which I've got taped down just so it doesn't wiggle around on me. And I'm going to be using a mixture of soft pastels and pastel pencils. Okay, so these are the colours that I've selected. So I've got a range of blues here, from a very dark blue to some aqua blues and true blue and a very pale blue. I've also got some greys here, and of course the vibrant oranges that we're going to be using within the breast of our Kingfisher. Now, to supplement the soft pastels, I will also be using pastel pencils. These are by Stabilo, and for those that are interested, I've got a mixture of brands of my soft pastels. I've been collecting from pastels for years, so I've got all sorts, but mainly Unison with some others thrown in for good measure. Oh, from Italy, welcome along from Italy. Wonderful to have you with us today. And the pastel pencils are Stabilo, Carbofello, and I've just selected similar colours in the pencils as I have in the pastels. The other tools that I've got here are a colour shaper blender. So if you don't like getting mucky, and we all know you get mucky with pastels, then you can use a colour shaper to blend the colours together. If you haven't got one of those, you can always use a paper stump, a good old paper stump. Okay, so that's the tools, very simple. Let's get started. So I have put down a very, very light outline of the Kingfisher on my pastel mat, and this is a dark grey pastel mat that I'm using, and we're just going to sketch him in. Now when I'm sketching for my pastel drawings, I tend to use a light grey, but today for camera I'm going to use white so it shows up better. Okay, so if you're drawing along, hopefully you can see the reference picture. I've got it pinned actually in the corner of the screen, so you can see it there if you haven't been able to print it off. And we're just going to very lightly sketch in the outline of our bird, paying real close attention to that reference picture. Always have it close by, so you're not having to spend too much time moving your head from side to side. You've got your reference picture. I've got mine here, so you can see it on screen. I've got mine printed off right in front of me, so I can see where I'm going. So we'll quickly get him sketched in, and then we'll start adding some wonderful, wonderful colours to our bird. The important thing when you're doing any animals is that you really pay attention to direction of feathers once you start filling him in, and the position of the eye. We want to make sure we get the position of the eye. Now I'm not going to do a detailed drawing because we're going to be filling him in with the beautiful pastels, just really marking out where those key colours are, those patterns in his plumage, under that chin there. Look how it comes down and then hooks round. And we've got this white blaze under his chin. Fabulous, he's coming to life already. 112 of you, wonderful. Great to have you all along today. Please say hello. Tell us where you're watching from. It'd be wonderful to know where you are in the world. Hello, Joy. one of my regulars. Good to have you along. So I work in all mediums, but pastel is one of my all-time favourites. What do I like about pastel? I like the spontaneity, I'll try that again, spontaneity of the medium, the speed of the medium. And to me, it's not drawing. Hello from Scotland. Hello, Sue. Good to have you along. Another lady from Italy, Maria. Hi, Maria. Now, are you drawing along, I wonder? Are you drawing along today, or are you just going to watch and have a go later? So just coming down to his tail feathers, and we're nearly there. Under to his little tootsies, as he's holding on to the rock. Now, I like to use my two favourite papers that I use for pastels are velour, which I tend to use for fluffy animals. So my pet portraits, I'll use velour. I like the softness of the fibres of velour, and it allows you to build layers of colour just like pastel mat does. So that's why my options when I'm doing pastels are usually sanded paper or velour paper. And it just depends on the animal as to what I'll choose. As I say, fluffier ones, I tend to use velour. Just it gives that softness to the texture. I'm just putting that little rock in, or tree stump that he's standing on. Okay, the only other thing I want to mark in now is where the feathers change from kind of soft and downy on the top half down to these pointy, longer feathers at the bottom of his wing. So there we have him. Just a little pattern here I need to sketch in. That dark shape around his eye. Orange. Fabulous. Okay, anyone else going to tell us where they're watching from? We really love to know. So we have our bird down, and now the fun part. We can really get wild with our colours. Now generally when I'm working with pastels, I work from dark through to light, just like when you're painting with acrylics, from darks through to the highlights to the lights. With the Kingfisher, I'm going to do it slightly different. With the Kingfisher, I like to get the mid colours in, the mid values down first, and then I'll add the darks and the lights afterwards. So I'm going to choose the colour. Here we go. I'm going to start with our, please tell me if I call him a woodpecker. I do have this really bad habit of calling things what they're not. I was doing a zebra class once and I referred to it as a giraffe. So I'll ask for forgiveness now. So I've got this lovely Satsuma orange. I'm using the pastel right against the paper on a flat edge, and just stroking in very gently over the paper. Now, because this is a unison pastel, it's really soft, really gets into the tooth of the paper quite quickly. And this is the stage that we call blocking in. So we're just blocking in these main colours. Okay, let's have a look up to the side of him where this orange comes to. Up, just under that blue blaze on his face, and down. Okay, down and around, just really softly stroking that pastel over the pastel mat. And of course, don't forget to come down into his towel, the underside of his towel. We've got a bit of orange in there too. And now I'm just going to fill in the middle. As I say, I'm holding the pastel right against the page, so I've got as much of the pastel in contact with the paper as possible. Just stroking that over really gently. The other thing I love about pastels is the fact that we can blend colours together. Okay, so we start with a base colour and then we mix it up. Then we start having fun, layering the colours, bringing one colour over the other, seeing the transition that that brings. I'm just going to pop a bit of orange in his face here, in his face, on his face, under the eye, coming up onto the tip now, up onto the tip of the pastel, just blocking in those lovely amber tones. Okay, anyone else going to tell us where they're joining us from today? Maybe I can't see all the comments. Let me just go to my laptop. Oh, no, I can. Fabulous. Okay, now looking at our Kingfisher, if you look down his chest, he's got lots of shadow coming in. The light is coming at our Kingfisher from top left. So he's got a highlight on his beak and the top of his head and his shoulders, but his belly's in shadow. I want to bring a stronger orange in. I'm not going to blend this yet. I'm just going to bring this stronger orange under the wing, up on the tip now, because I'm being more precise about the placement. Just stroking really softly over our Kingfisher. I'm going to bring a pop of this colour at the back, just at the side there, just behind that white blaze, and just drag a few pops of this colour. Now the other place where he looks quite bright is under here, just as we come over to the bump for his feet, so a little bit there. Okay, I'm going to give this a quick blend now. Now I like to get mucky, get my hands in, so I'm going straight in with the tip of my finger and just pushing this pastel backwards and forwards into the pastel mat, getting it into the grain of this sanded paper. Depends what paper you're using. If you're using normal pastel paper, you will find that you don't need much pushing or coaxing at all. In fact, your problem with normal pastel paper is fighting the dust. As you can see, there's no dust coming up on this because the paper's really holding on to the pastel. Here we go. Pushing that in, losing the grey paper behind now. And as I say, if you don't like the feel of the pastel, you don't like the feel of the sanded paper, you can switch to a blending tool and just stroke that over the top. And that way you get to keep clean hands. Okay, so that's his chest blocked in. Now I want to start bringing those lovely shadows into his plumage. Now I'm going to go for this dark brown. It's just a bit of a pastel. You can see I've got all sorts of bits that are broken off. They're really useful, broken bits of pastel, because you've got lots of sharp edges to use. So now I want to look where those shadows are sitting within his chest. Looking at that reference picture, I'm just going to slide really gently now, because I've got a lot of pastel on the paper, and pull down where I see those darker shadows that exist within his chest there. So a little bit up on the right hand side, coming onto his breast and down. It's really this patch in the centre. And again, I'm going to use my blending tool this time. I'm going to push this back in and blend it into the oranges underneath. Give it a good blend. And don't worry if you put too much on. The joy is with pastels, we can go back in with our oranges and bring some light back. But I think this is looking okay. If you have any questions at all whilst we're going, please comment, put your question in the comment box. I do look up at the screen every now and again, so I'll try and pick your comments and answer your questions as I go. But if I miss anything, I'll come back to you at the end of the session, okay? So there we go, giving him a bit of shape and a bit of form by adding those shadow colours in. I'm going to take my brown again, and under his towel, although it's orange, I want to add a little bit of shadow down there too, and blend it back. Blend it back. Now, although I'm going to switch to pencils or mix it up with pencils at some point, you can easily complete this whole bird with your soft pastels. Excellent. Dirty already, that's what we like to see. Okay, now there's going to be some highlights come into his chest as well. So if we look in that reference picture, let's see if I can point to it. In the reference picture down on his chest, remember the sun is coming from here. It's bouncing on his beak. It's also bouncing around his chest here. So I'm going to take this light yellow. This is another unison, lemon yellow, Powell lemon. I'm just going to tap in. Now this time I'm coming up onto the tip. I'm going to tap in more marks that look like feathers. So far we've just been blending a smooth colour, blocking in. Now I'm starting to think about the feathers, the texture, as the sunlight's hitting the top of these feathers, and the direction. Direction is key. I said at the beginning, you need to pay attention to the direction of the plumage, of the way those feathers are growing. Now, for this bit, I want to tap these in because they're looking far too obvious. Oh, hi Anne, good to see you. I just spotted you up there. So with my finger, I'm just going to tap and pull, just muting those marks, softening the marks back into his plumage. So they're not standing out little soldiers. We want it nice and soft, just like the bird. I'm told that where I live in Northampton, there are quite a few kingfishers along the rivers here, along the River Nen. I've yet to see one, but I hope to one day. So I've just moved, guys. This was the orange I used to start with. I'm just going to go to a slightly lighter orange here. Can you see? So that's the first one. This one's slightly lighter. I'm just adding a few more feathers up on the edge of the pastel and stroking downwards to create a few feathers, lighter orange ones, over the dark orange. Just tap them in, tiny little mark, just pull downwards to add some variety to the colours showing in his chest. And again, just soften that in. Very light wipe over those marks, just to soften them into the plumage. He's looking pretty cool already. I'm quite pleased with him so far. Sue Roberts from Scotland. Anyone else going to make any comments? You're all very quiet today. I'm used to much more banter. Okay, now then, where should we go next? I'm going to do his blue feathers. I just love getting these colours down. So remember I said I've got 3 main blues. So this one's like a cerulean blue, slightly darker, more like an azure blue. And I have my navy, my really dark blue. Remember what I said at the beginning, I'm going to start with my mid colour. So pick that one up. And we're just going to block in again. I'm coming up onto the tip of the pastel because I'm coming around the orange. And I want to feed this blue into the orange. I'm going to turn my board around a little bit because I'm left-handed. I don't want my hand blocking everything. Let me move those out of the way. Okay, just up by his face, can you see a bit of his shoulder just going behind the white of his throat? Just pop that in. I'm going to come around the edge of the wing first. round. And then, coming up on the tip of the pastel again, I'm going to feed that back using the very edge of the pastel into the orange. Just pull some of that pastel forward across into the orange. So you're getting this overlap with the orange underneath. Down the shoulder, we will be bringing a lovely highlight down that shoulder. Down we come. And now I'm just going to block in. So I'm pushing that pastel against the paper so I'm getting more contact with the paper because this is quite a large area. Just stroking this beautiful cerulean blue over the wing, the top part of the wing. I'm going to leave a few gaps on the left hand side, okay, because I really want some lights and some highlights to come in. Now you can bring the lights over the dark, but I really want a pop of highlight in that section. So I'm not going to block that part in. So just here, I'm just going to leave that. I'm also going to come down. I'm going to skip out the tail feathers for a minute. The long feathers, and I'm going to come down to that feather that's sitting over his bottom, over his tail. There's two feathers there, one laying on top of the other, two marks coming in his tail area. Fabulous. Okay, whilst I've got this blue in my hand, I'm also going to come under the flash of blue, that telltale blue on the tip of my pastel again, blocking in the shape, comes right up to the beginning of his beak, pop of colour under the beak, and also on the back of the head. You just turn that round a bit more, on the back of the head, over the top of the head, sneaking up towards his eye, over the crown, around the orange blaze. Now, if you're not confident doing small areas with your chunky pastel, you could switch to the same colour in pencil form so that you get a nice crisp line along the outside. Okay, just use what you're comfortable with. Don't feel that you have to use the soft pastels. You can switch anytime. Anything that I'm showing you with the soft pastels, you can achieve with the pencils. So we've got his head in. We've blocked all the main areas of blue. I'm just going to get a hand wipe, guys. I've noticed I've already messed up my page. Here we go. The good thing with Pastel Mat is it does allow you to use a normal eraser if you mess up the background. You can't do that so much with velour. But you could put a nice muted background in if you wanted. Just take some greens like in the photo reference and blur some greens in the background. I might show you if we have time at the end how you would achieve that. We'll just see how we do for time. Okay, now then, let's go back into this plumage and add some highlights and some darks. So that's my mid colour. I'm going to go for my stronger blue now. Just a bit darker version of the one I used before. I'm just going to tap that in along these feathers kind of midway. Just getting some variety of colour in his plumage. So he's got this kind of band coming down the middle. Now I'm going to go to my darks. Now I don't know if you guys find the same problem, but I've got all sorts. I've used for years Faber-Castell pencils, and I've only just recently switched to Stabilo. I do find them slightly softer than the Faber-Castell, but the dark blues in all the ranges are really hard to get the colour down. Okay, so you can go to your pencil, and now I'm really looking at the markings, these shapes that are formed in the feathers here. So we've kind of got a V shape coming up. If you just look at the pattern and forget that it's a bird and that it's feathers, I just want you to look at the patterns where these darks exist. Okay, so I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to use my soft pastel, find a nice edge, and I'm going to come with the dark blue along the edge of his wing, where again he has a strong shadow. So let's pop that in, get some separation between the wing and the body. There's darks in there. Again, it all helps with form. And we're going to go into making these patterns, she says, on the edge of the wing. Now this is a real big chunky pastel, so I'm being careful because sometimes it's hard to see where you're going because the pastel takes up so much of the space. So just kind of V shapes, soft V shapes, coming in the end like one feather laying over another. And some of them along this edge, you can just see one side. And then another V shape coming in. Gently, very gently, you don't need much pressure on your pastel. Coming down, looking, keeping my eye on that reference picture all the time, looking where these little dark spots, sometimes they're just spots, other times they're more like feather shapes. Think how one feather lays on top of the other. A few more marks down that central line. Okay, and back down to the tail feather. Let's not forget down here, there's a big shadow along the edge of the first feather and under the bottom one. So we're starting to get some pattern into our bird now. I'm going to go back. Remember the blues, the lightest one, the cerulean, then the one that's slightly darker. I'm going to take some of that and just tap it in above the dark blue marks. Just above, slide up. So there's multicolours in these feathers. There we go. I'm just going to now add the highlights. So these real blings, the highlights, again, let me bring the reference picture back. All these lights, tiny little light colours dotted around in the feathers. And they sit just above these dark marks. So we've got our dark mark, we've got our blue above, and then we're just going to come in with a little fleck in that shape, within that shape, tiny little mark of highlight in those feathers. This is going to look a bit strange for a little while, and we're going to create some magic in a moment when we blend those in very gently, just coming around the edge of the feather, looking for those highlights. So he's a bit spotty at the moment. Okay, very gently now, I'm just going to push up, slide up with my finger, very gently. So you get that sweep of the feathers, okay? Don't push too hard, just a real gentle sweep, just to soften those marks in and to give it movement, to give the feathers that sense of the length of them going up under each other. Fabulous. Whilst I've got this very pale blue, I'm going to come in, I'm going to turn it up the other end where I've got a sharp edge, top of those tail feathers, and I'm just going to, I haven't got room to slide up, so I'm just going to slide down, bring that highlight to his little tail. How are we getting on out there? Are you keeping up if you're painting along? I know I can be quite quick, but I'm on a time limit, aren't I, SAA? Supposed to try and do this in an hour, but I think we will run over just slightly. Okay, now then, into his shoulder. Back to his shoulder, I wanted the highlights. Using my very pale blue. If you haven't got pale blue, just use a white or a grey, a very light grey. I'm just going to stroke, looking at the feathers, thinking about the feathers and the patterns, coming down that shoulder and coming some way in, right onto the tip of my pastel, very, very gently, just stroking lightly over the blue. Again, initially that's going to look harsh. I'm actually going to go back in with my light blue, the one we put over the feathers, on the tip again, and just stroke a few marks through those feathers there. And again, here we go. Blend and pull down, blend and pull down. Just wipe your finger over, softening those marks, giving them a lovely soft look. We're going to go over that with some pencils in a moment. So we'll add a bit more with the tip of a pencil. Obviously it allows you to get far more detail in. Okay, bottom feathers. I've left those out for now because there's more definition in them and we want to get the shapes. And I'm going to go to a dark grey, and I want to define those patterns in the feathers. So there's a section just under that blue part of the top wing where there's a V shape, just up here, the start of the tail feathers. I'm just going to pop my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. When I'm doing more detail, I do find I need my glasses to see. Coming down, looking at the pattern and bringing the dark shadows between the feathers now. So we're looking for those dark areas that exist in between the tail feathers. I think I've counted right. And how they taper off around the bottom, that slight curve to the bottom of the feather. And into the tip of this one feather that's sticking out at the bottom of the towel with my dark grey. Pulling back, up towards the rest of our bird. I'm going to stick with the pencils now, guys. And I've got similar blues to the ones I've got in my soft pastels, okay? My pale blue, my dark blue, and a mid. It's not dark, cerulean. Variations of cerulean. So I'm going to go for the mid colour, bringing in these bands of blue over the feathers. Coming down in stripes. You need a bit more pressure on your pastel pencil. If you haven't got pencils, just do this with the edge of your soft pastel, okay? Come up onto the tip and just be careful with your mark making. Down, looking at that reference picture, looking for these patterns. All the clues are there. We just have the job of finding them. Okay, fabulous. Down we come. There's a few little under feathers just showing in that towel. Can you see them? Just before the tip of the towel. Come right up on the tip of the, just hiding there in the dark. 3 little lines, 4 little lines actually, of feathers hiding underneath. Then onto my lightest blue. In we go for highlights. Tend to be on the left hand side of each feather. Over we go, stroking nice and confidently over the top. bringing those tail feathers in. Now don't worry if you go over your darks, okay? You can bring them back in. You can take your grey and reshape, widen that shadow between certain feathers. You can go again. I'm making a mess here, aren't I? I did say to myself today I would be really organised for you guys. But as usual, I've got pastels everywhere. Okay. Any more comments? Any questions, guys? Not seen anything come up. Have I missed something? No? Okay, onwards and upwards. I'm going to add a real highlight to these feathers now with my white. Just here and there where I can see a strong highlight over the top. Got a little bit of dust there, just blow it away. A couple of highlights. You want a nice sharp pencil. Now the thing is with pastels, every time you take one colour over the top of another, it's automatically blending those colours, and your white will always look softer over the top of another colour. It's affected by the colour of the pigment underneath. Okay, I'm also going to use the white just to hint at these feathers, the other side that I can see, and a little bit of my blue. Now making finer adjustments, okay, so coming back up his back with my cerulean blue, coming into the edge of that feather, I can see a darkness on that middle section just before we come to the highlights. So just adding that in there, and then my lighter blue coming in. Now this is where I said we're going to make some amendments, some changes, add a bit more definition to his shoulder area. And I'm going to do that with a mixture of my dark grey and my light blue. Okay, you could use dark blue, actually change your mind, dark blue and light blue. I'm just going to add some of these downy feathers at the top of his shoulder. Look at the direction, they're coming straight down with a slight kink. At the top part, they're kinking off to the left. And as you come further down his shoulders, the lines are coming in. Can you see that? They're curving around. The feathers are curving around. See what I mean about dark blue pencils? They really do struggle. They must put more pigment, more binder, sorry, in the pigment. So you do have to work a bit harder. If anyone has found a really good pencil in dark blue, I would love to know about it. Mention it in the comments. It'd be good for everybody. And now the light grey over the top. Very light grey over the top. Just again, add in some very fine, come right up onto the tip, just touching in, creating some texture within the feathers on his back. Blow away any dust. We don't need to blend this with our finger. They're very small marks. Finally, before we leave his wing, there's a few more little white specks that I want to bring in at the back here. That one was too big, guys, too big. Just take your blue over the top and reduce it. A few more highlights in that shoulder. There we go. So I'm quite happy with that. Just going to shapen the end of his tail up with my dark grey. Fabulous. Okay, moving on then to his head. And we're going to put his eye in. I'm going to try and zoom my camera in for you guys so you can see a bit closer what I'm doing. Bear with me 1 second while I just go to my camera and zoom this in for you. There we go, to his eye. Look at the highlight in his eye. Look where the light's hitting the top of the roundness of his eye as it comes and protrudes from his eye socket. So I'm going to start with my dark grey. Just bring my reference picture a little closer. And I'm going to come around the eye socket first. Just around the edge of the white that I drew for you earlier. Around on the tip of your pencil, around that eye socket. And I'm going to extend that grey. Look how the grey carries on up into the feathers, the blue feathers on the top of his head. Look at the angle, just pulling upwards. And there's some darker feathers also in his head there. So whilst I've got the grey in my hand, I'm going to extend and go out to the back of the head there. And then around the side of the eye, just like ours, it comes to an oval shape. Oval, not an oval, an almond shape, that's the word I was looking for. I'm going to bring my very light grey next and come around the eyelid, back over the white drawing that I did at the beginning, the sketch, with the light grey and under, just around the outside of that dark line. Can you see? It's as close as I can bring the camera. Hopefully you can see that. Adding a bit of definition around the outside of the eye. I hope at the end of this you will share with us your paintings of this lovely little bird. I'd love to see them later. So when you're finished and you're happy with them, you can post them up on here. That would be fabulous. Now back to the dark grey, I'm going into the pupil, coming around the top of the eye and back down the other side. So I'm kind of blocking in, stronger in the bottom, leaving the top clear. It's a tiny area, but it's worth taking the time. And then I'm going to use my white to come in the top, the curve of the eye, where the sunlight's hitting. Around we come, top of the eyeball, just with that glint from the sun. There we go, blow away any dust. Back to my dark grey, I'm just going to extend under the eye, under that bottom eyelid and out towards the beak. So we've got this little section in here of dark just before we come into the beak, just under that orange. And now let's continue. We've got the grey in our hands. We might as well continue with this grey along the beak itself. Look at that shape. It's like a spear, isn't it? Perfect for catching his fish. So under the beak, along that bottom edge. Now he has a white tip on the end of his beak. Do you see that? There's a white tip at the end. And coming in now to the end, the top side of the beak, by the eye, coming along, curving as you go. And we're just going to block in with the grey, with the pencil, for shading bottom part of the beak. It's in shadow, remember. I'm also going to pick up, whilst I've got the dark grey in my hand, coming along the beak, coming along the edge, around the face here, where there's a shadow under the blue. We might as well do these whilst we have the grey in our hand, and around the white there. Back up towards the eye. Fabulous. Okay. Very light grey next, over the top of the beak, where the sunlight's hitting. Oops, I've just broken my pencil. Stroke along, nice controlled stroke, a nice sharp line, and pull back, pull back. Then we have the separation between the top bill and the bottom with this little line just underneath, coming from the blue and along. Very gentle, just bring that bottom line in. Fabulous, nice and easy. I'm going to add a little hint of blue into that beak. Just taking my mid blue, my cerulean blue, over the grey, just a little bit. Just a hint, and I'm going to use my small blending tool just to wipe that in. There we go. And remember the tip of his beak, we've got this pop of white right on the end. I've smudged my bird's wing, we'll sort that out in a moment, into the tip of his beak. Just there, pop of white. And right along that edge, just take the white over the grey. You'll see how much lighter it is, how pale. It's not as bright when you use it over another colour. I'm just going to clean this up where I had a little smudge. Now, a good thing you can do, and I didn't get a piece out, is to put some glassine paper over your work to stop you smudging. Okay, just lay the paper over. I'm just going to grab a sheet. I've got a bit of glassine paper here. I'm just going to pop that over there to save me having a mistake again. Okay, we're doing really well. I hope you're following along still. I don't see any comments. Any more comments? Any questions? Ask away. Don't be shy. Let me know you're still there. Okay. We need to add some pattern now to his head, to those feathers. So we're going to mix, we're going to work through our blues again and the oranges, but this time I'm going to do it in pencil format because it's a much smaller area, it's easier to work. I'm taking the oranges that match the ones I used earlier, and also I've got a bit of umber, a burnt sienna. So two of oranges, a cadmium red and a burnt sienna, and for the plumage the same blues as before. So up the top of the head we're going to bring the darks in with our dark blue, looking at those patterns across the top of the head. Now really think about the direction here, guys, because these lines, the angle we're seeing him, we're not seeing him straight on. If we were seeing him straight on, those marks would be going across the head like so. But we're seeing him from the side. So the lines are coming slightly to the right and across the top of the head with these little dark marks indicating those tiny little feathers on the top of his head. Remember how small these birds are, they are tiny. The one we're doing here is bigger than life size. And coming in again with another band of these dark blue indications of those feathers on the head, and right at the back of the head is quite dark. A few more. In we go. Coming out of that orange segment and across to the beak. So we've got that pattern in his head, and now we can bring the highlights in. Now this time I'm going to go straight for the white because his head is in direct sunlight. I'm just going to do the same thing, pull these little marks in between the dark blue, the pattern of the feathers on the edge of his head. There we go. They get very small towards the eye. And they're kind of interlaced, okay? So one row where you've got the blue mark, on the second row you'll have the white corresponding mark. They're kind of laced and layered. Now I'm going to go back to my blue. And I'm using the blue over the top, very softly, just to mute them down and blend them together. So instead of a blending tool, I'm using my pencil like a blending tool. Over the top, there we go. And I just want to darken the line along the top edge of his head there. Really make that stand strong. There we go. I just realised I had the grey in my hand. So we're getting that lovely pattern on the top of his head, and we're going to do exactly the same down this section of his face into the blue, little dots of dark blue coming up to the beak, and then coming across. Look at the feather direction. They're now coming across his cheek, bringing some of those markings in. Fabulous. There we go. Speckling him up. A couple of white marks where he's got some highlights. Just stroking it in the direction. All your mark making should follow the direction wherever you can see it. Adding some pattern in there. And now, just like we did last time, I'm going to go back in with my blue over the top, using it kind of like a blending tool, just to soften over some of those marks. Sharpen up around the face there, under the eye. And a few marks with the light blue. Just mixing it up. Generally, when I'm doing pastel work on my own, I'm sat here with a handful of colours and I interlace them, change them, a little bit more blue over the top. Oh, the sun's come out, how lovely. Okay, so that's the blue areas taken care of. Let's switch to our orange pencils and do the same. Now we've already got our mid colour over his face. I'm just going to take my little blending tool and push that into the paper and around his nose there. Push it in, give it a little rub. There we go. I'm going to go dark orange first. Again, just putting little marks in the direction of the hair growth, coming into that pop of orange by his nose. And then into my light, it's more like a cadmium yellow deep, I would say, coming under the eye. It's tiny areas, but take your time and put these patterns in. It will make all the difference. Finally, I'm going to move to my cadmium red and just bring some darker colours on the right hand side, this section of his face. Just a little pop of colour. And one thing we've missed, has anyone spotted it? His nostril. We need a nostril. So I'm going to use the red first underneath. And the nostril is just sitting at the edge of his beak here. I'm going to pop this red here so you can see where I've put it. And then I'm going to take my dark grey over the tops. But a little bit of red, leave a little bit of red showing. Just there. Just reshaping that beak a little bit whilst I'm there. So we're on the home straight. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Okay, into the colours under his chin and to the side of his face. Now most people would just reach for the white, but we're not going to do that today. It's more yellows. I can see yellows in there. I can see a bit of reflection from the orange from his chest. Let me just grab the colours that I want. I've got a nice buttery cream colour here, and I will be using my white as well. And I'm going to start with the darker colours. Pop that back on there. So my darker orange coming up this middle section, just using my pencil to create little soft marks under his throat. Up we come towards the beak. There's definitely a reflection of the oranges from his chest. And then into my cream. This is a buttery cream. Looks like Lurpak. There are other brands. Over the top. Little dashes. Just little tiny dashes going up towards that beak. Come along that edge. Shape around under his shoulder. Working this cream over the top so it mutes down and blends in the colours that we've put down already. Here we go. Up the other side, under the beak. Nice and strong there. And then bring little flecks of cream, little flecks over the top of the oranges. It's mixing and blending as you put your marks to the paper. It's working with the oranges we've put down to give us this lovely chest, throat, should I say, in our Kingfisher. Beautiful. Okay. Now, if you look really closely at that reference picture, remember it's in the corner there for you to see, you can see tiny little feathers coming from this white area over the orange. So I want you to use the tip of your pencil and push and lift very lightly indeed, just creating a feathered edge, a soft fluffy edge to where the white meets the orange and the blue. Tiny little marks. I was going to add some white next. Let me just have a think. Yeah, I think we'll add a little bit of white just to this top left-hand side of his throat. So over the top with your white pencil or your soft pastel. Again, tiny little marks indicating the feathers. And look how again you've got those little fluffy edges of the feathers just going over the darks. So take your white onto the tip and slide it up over those dark blues and the greys that we put down. Few little feathers. Let me just have a look at the shape. I think I've gone a little bit out on his throat. I'm just going to, not that it really matters, but I want him to be right. Just going to bring his throat a bit wider. Just looking back at that reference picture, it didn't look quite right. That's better, isn't it? Okay, side bit, nice and easy. I'm just going to go in with my buttery cream into this little patch of lightness at the side of his face. I will also bring a tiny bit of orange through, just a reflected colour. And finally, the white. There we go. Few more areas just to go back into. Above his nose on this orange section here, I just want to bring some highlights with the cream to the edge as that orange goes to the blue. Few little lines through there. And I'm going to add some highlights under the eye. So where the orange here under the eye meets the blue, Just going to bring some cream over. Remember, it's going to blend with the orange underneath, just to lighten that part of his face. And again, bring some tiny little feathers back through into the orange. Just adding some feathery bits to the orange, to the blue, just like we did with the white. Isn't he gorgeous? Don't you just love a kingfisher? Wow. What's the time? How are we doing, guys? How are we doing, Gary? Are we still okay? Can I continue? An hour now, so not done bad at all. I thought it might overrun by longer than that. Okay, now let's bring his little feet in. Orange, my mid-orange with the pencil. Remember, one leg is towards us, and then we can just see the tip of his toe. Oops, I need to zoom out, don't I? Let me just adjust that zoom a second, guys. Bear with me. There we go. Into his toes, curled over, his little thumb holding on to the wood. Bring that mid-orange, the one we started off with at the beginning, into those toes. And then I'm going to take my cream along the top, over the orange, to add a highlight to his little spindly little feet. Back to my orange again, just to soften and push those two colours together. So we've got a little highlight on his foot. I'm going to take my burnt umber, nice dark brown, and just come along the toe underneath the foot, underneath that toe with a darker brown, just under the toe and under the left hand side of his leg as it heads to the body. Very subtle. And a little bit on the toe, we can just see in the background there. Yet again, I'll go back to my orange. Sorry guys, I'm just switching the screen because I realise I'm on the wrong screen, in case you make a comment. You are quiet lot today, unless I can't see the comments. I've not used this Facebook Live with somebody else before, so I'm not sure. But if someone could just say hello so I could see if the comment comes up, that would be great. Put my mind at rest. I'm not just talking to myself here. Okay, here we go. Highlight. So I've taken the orange back over to use it to blend the colours together. And now his leg is quite light as it comes back under the body, so I'm highlighting it with a bit of cream. And then if you look really, really closely under here, look where his leg joins the body. It's not super clear, but there are some soft feathers coming towards the thigh on his leg. So using my light cream, I'm just going to come over the orange with some little feathery marks to indicate where those feathers are coming forward around his thigh. A little bit fluffy, coming towards his bottom. There we go. And coming back. Tiny little marks just to give that illusion of those feathers, where they're raised, where his legs forward and more towards us. And behind that, I'm going to take my umber and just add a little shadow just above that front foot, just a little shadow behind, and soften it in with your finger. Just tap it in. You don't want it too prominent, but there's just a little shadow to bring that leg forward. has a real good effect. Okay, I'm just going to go back to my orange that we started with and add a few little areas, tidy up the edge where I can still see the white from my sketch, just getting rid of those. Fabulous. Okay, claws. First time for today, we're using the black in the claws. Little tiny claws. Fabulous. I will just take this black back into the eye, just to darken the bottom section a little. And I'm going to take it under the bottom of the beak. That bottom line, strengthening. This is tweaking now. We're doing finishing touches to our bird. A little bit of black on the tip of that wing feather there. I always save my black till last to deepen the colours where I need them, having a last look over our bird. And now into the chest. I want a little bit more definition in the feathers in the chest area. So again, with my cream, or you could use a light yellow, I'm going to come into the chest and create the patterns. Now look at the angles as we come out and around. Let me pop that over there, smudging again. You need a nice sharp pencil. Bring those little feather marks out and around the chest there. Just building up a sense of depth and adding to the highlights. Tiny little dashes of a mark. Just give him that fluffed up look, like he's just been in the river and popped out, looking for his next bite to eat. There we go. Bit more definition there, and you can continue to do that over the underside of the belly if you so wish. It's not so obvious under there, so I would opt for a slightly lighter orange and bring your feather-like marks. I'm working back up, back up, doing these little dashes towards the cream that I've just put down, just adding a little bit more texture to areas within his chest. Just bring in some of that lighter orange very, very gently. Your mark does not need to be strong. Don't push too hard on your pencil. Just keep it nice and light and soft. I'm going to drag a few reds over the orange. Just mixing it up now, guys. Just finishing touches, seeing where I want an extra pop of colour. And I know that the red's not going to look too strong against the orange underneath because it's blending. Back to my grey. I want a bigger shadow, just looking back at that reference picture under this wing. And drag a few marks from the feathers through the orange. Just flicking that pencil back towards the orange, going over the orange. Just really strengthening that shadow there on the wing. A little bit, just a touch of black. Fabulous. Okay, so I would say our bird, other than some final tweaks here and there, is pretty much done. So all that leaves us to finish off with is the rock, adding some shadow to the rock. So we're going to go back to our soft pastels. Let me get rid of all these out of the way. You may have noticed I had a couple of greens selected earlier and some greys. So I'm going to start with my grey. This is going to make for good viewing. Grey on grey paper. I'm using the chalk on its length. Just pushing it against the paper and adding some general blocking in again to the tree stump. Come between the toes there. And now I'm going to add, what shall I add next? I'm just thinking. a bit of darker grey to create the shadow that is cast in from his body under the towel there, up the edge of that wood. Now we want to get the sense of texture in this surface. Okay, we've got that shadow in. And now I'm going to use my greens. This is very bleached out piece of wood. There's not many browns that I'm seeing in here. So I'm going to take my dark olive green. I'm just going to slide it gently over the surface. Just let it hit the bumps of your paper. I'm going to take, I just realised I didn't get a yellow ochre out, so I'm going to have to compromise. I'm going to take my lighter green and do the same thing. Just slide it really gently over the surface of the wooden stump there. And then back to my light grey. Add in some gnarly bits, some pattern to the wood. So I'm coming up onto its edge, just coming in and creating some patterns in the wood. Gnarly, stumpy, some lines through. There we go, just blocking that side a bit better with the light grey. And then back to my dark grey, which is going to have to double up as a brown. I'm going to bring some gnarly marks into the wood, just right up onto an edge. Look at the patterns. Be nice and loose and free. Just dragging those through. And to finish, with some highlights. Wherever you find a shadow, there's a highlight, okay? So wherever there's a crack in the wood, the light's coming from here, we know that. So to the left-hand side, we'd have a bit of a highlight to these cracks. So coming onto the edge of my white soft pastel, along some of these crevices in the wood, just adding that little highlight to the left-hand side. And also I'm going to use the white to add a real highlight to the bottom, to the side of the stump here. I do have a brown in a pencil, so I could use that and shade using the side of the pencil. Just a bit more colour to this tree stump. But really it's better with your soft pastels. And then just coming into that shadow again, making it really dark with my black under his bottom. Really dark under there. Fade that out into the grey. And I want a shadow under his feet, under his toes. And there we are, guys. I think, sadly, I have to say, it's been so much fun working with you all today. That's pretty much our Kingfisher completed. So as I said before, please ask any questions you have. Put them in the comments. I'd love to see your work. So if you want to share what you've done, what you've created, I'd absolutely love to see it. And just before I go, I obviously am a member of the SAA and I advertise my classes on there. And I also have an on-demand offering. So I just want to leave you with a little clip just to show you just a taster of the lessons that I offer on my website, which is up on the screen there. Here we go. I'll be back. are finished. Thank you so much for spending your Monday morning, our first Monday of summer, with me today in my studio. It's been a joy to have you along. Thank you to the SAA for letting me demonstrate this lovely little kingfisher, and I hope to see you all again in the future. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Bye bye.